Max is a lifetime soldier. He served in the British military and in the U.S. military. He is now a U.S. citizen, and Max is an expert. He provides tactical training and consulting services. He's also the author of many tactical manuals and even a fictional book, so he really helps out individuals who want to prepare should an economic collapse happen or a catastrophe happen. He's quite an individual. Max, thank you so much for joining us on InfoWars Nightly News.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, Max, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you said, I spent a considerable period of time in the British Army, and then I spent several years, 5 years over in Iraq and Afghanistan as a security contractor, and then I settled in the States, joined the U.S. military, and became a U.S. citizen. And I live here now with my wife and kids. And despite the accent, I consider myself a patriot for the Constitution, the Second Amendment, and that's pretty much me. I have written those books, as you say. One of them, the main one, Contact, a tactical manual for post-collapse survival, is aimed at people to help them survive, and it's a tactical manual. And as you mentioned, the book Patriot Dawn is just recently out, and that's an attempt to bring a message via a fictional novel, which it seems to me is a good way of bringing those sort of things to people and giving them a good impression about what they might expect and how they might best prepare themselves.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're going to absolutely get to those in a second. But I'm very interested. Obviously, you're from Britain. What do you think about Piers Morgan's recent rants and his desire to have strict gun control?
Piers Morgan is outrageous. I mean, for starters, I'm not sure what his immigration status is, but I don't think he should be here in the United States telling people that they have to change the Constitution and they have to get rid of the Second Amendment. I think it's outrageous. He did some pretty outrageous things when he was in the UK. Now he's over here. I saw I forget the name of it, the thing that people signed to get him back to the UK. Someone commented to me that they didn't want him back in the UK. But on a serious note, I mean, he's a front man for the agenda to disarm Americans, and I think that the way he kind of trivializes and tries to paint people as crazy. And you see an interview with him, and if you mention the real reason for the Second Amendment, not all these little excuses that he comes out with, and he talks, and if you actually bring up the real reason, to defend against tyranny, to maintain the power, with the sovereign people, the American people, he always seems to try and denigrate the person, and I don't like his tactics, I don't like his arrogance, and I think that he shouldn't be doing what he's doing.
Now, I'm very interested your take on this, because you're from Britain and the UK. You obviously understand that culture. It's a wonderful culture. You know about the American culture. Piers Morgan, and it's not about Piers Morgan, it's about, people with his mindset, says that, we're not sensible because of our Second Amendment. We have the right to maybe own a gun to protect ourselves in our house, but, we shouldn't conceal carry. We shouldn't have assault weapons. What's your take on that as a British, an American citizen now, but, born in Britain?
Well, I mean, I am extremely happy to be living in the United States and to have the right to have firearms and to have the right, I'm looking at things like potential collapse, economic collapse, and to be able to equip myself so I can protect my family should something like that happen. The other side of it, and I would worry if I was in the UK right now, and should we have an economic collapse, I would not be able to do much about it in terms of defending my family. I sort of understand a little bit well, there's two sides to this. Obviously, Piers Morgan is pushing an agenda, but at the same time, having him come from the UK, I understand his kind of almost revulsion about firearms, because they're not really in society in the UK, which actually doesn't make it more of a peaceful society in the UK. It's actually more of a violent society, and people are much more ready to go to violence, go to fist fighting, beating people to death in the streets, using claw hammers, whatever they've got. So it's definitely not a less violent society in the UK. But for instance, I was in the British Army, and we had our weapons, and they were locked in an armory when we weren't using them, and we didn't have them in society. So you didn't go home and have one, you didn't have a concealed carry, they were just locked away, and you would take them out when you were going to do some training or go on a mission. So there is a very different understanding about firearms in the UK, but that's because obviously they took them away a long time ago, and people are not used to them. So, which is precisely what people want, with this kind of programming that's going on in the United States right now, is to create, in our school children, a kind of revulsion about guns and firearms, and everybody has one. It's crazy. Whereas in fact, given that the bad guys, whether that be potential government tyranny or whether that just be the criminals, if they've got those guns, I mean, the sensible thing is that even if there was no Second Amendment, the good guys need to have guns to protect themselves against the bad guys. Luckily, we have the Second Amendment, which prevents this kind of propaganda from, well, hopefully is going to prevent this propaganda from pushing through all the way and getting what they want, which is a total ban on guns.
Do you think the UK is more dangerous than the United States in terms of violent crimes?
Yes, I think that I mean, it's not that there are no guns in the UK, because a lot of criminals have guns, but of course, that you could say that kind of criminal gun violence is confined to the criminal gang sort of classes and areas and groups. But in general, the UK is I feel it's a lot quicker to violence than it is in the US. Having lived in the US for a number of years now, in the UK, I remember growing up. I mean, they changed the laws on pubs now to have like all-night opening, but it used to be that they all used to have to close at 11 o'clock at night, and there was kicking out time onto the streets, and that was basically Fight Club. There's no understanding or fear in the UK that someone may have a gun in their waistband or in their truck, and therefore that might kind of dissuade you a little bit from wanting to go and beat them down. In the UK, people will go to that kind of violence very readily, and people always hark back to the old days, but unlike when there may have been a little bit of sort of gentlemanly conduct in the old days, nowadays, if you go to the ground in the street outside a pub, then you'll probably find yourself kicked into oblivion by the guy's friends. So, and there is no ability in the UK to defend yourself from that by having a firearm. So if you're the victim of mob violence, which is increasingly happening, drunken mob violence, as we see, society seems to be, falling down around us, both in the UK and in the US, then you have no way other than being able to get out of there to actually protect yourself from it.
Wow. Now, would you say your mindset is the minority? I mean, would you say that most British people disagree with you on this, that they think a society with no guns is better? Because every time I hear a Brit on TV, when it comes to this one issue, they seem to disagree with you. They seem to not like guns, and they think that, oh my gosh, that's horrendous.
I think that as a result of many, many years without guns in society, people have been programmed to think that they're a bad thing. Unless you're someone like myself who either is in the military or hunts or whatever it might be, you still have a very small number of target shooters in the UK. But generally, people think gun violence is a bad thing in the same way it's being pushed. Sorry, did I say gun violence? But of course, gun violence is a bad thing. But people think that guns themselves are a bad thing because they just simply don't have them, and they have the unfamiliarity with them, which I think perhaps you might be seeing that in the United States now, where a lot of people, they haven't been brought up in that way, where they've been taken out target shooting. They've been, they live out on a farm, whatever it might be, and they maybe the only time they've seen guns is maybe in movies or perhaps criminals in a neighborhood, whatever that might be. So I think there is a back to your original question, which is, yes, there is a different mindset in the UK, and that may be something that's coming to the United States right now.
Now, you've written a couple of books, and one of them is called Contact, a tactical manual for post-collapse survival. Now, why do you believe our society is headed for a collapse?
It was a little bit of a personal journey of mine as I became a prepper. Initially, I was away with the army, and I was trying to prepare my family by remote control as a hurricane was coming in, sort of by remote. And after that, I got into prepping, and it went from a 72-hour thing to really reading what the potential situations were out there, and then that's what led me to initially write Contact, because I wanted to be able to, when I was thinking about what I need to do for my family, I wanted to put my knowledge that I have from being in two militaries, being a security contractor in Iraq and Afghanistan. I wanted to put that in a way not in a kind of a tactical way that people wouldn't understand, but in a way that people with families could use this information to defend themselves. And as I started to, on that journey, which I'm still going through of understanding and gaining knowledge, I started to see how fragile our society is with with the debt, with the economic situation, and of all the kind of doomsday prepper scenarios that you see out there, the one I think is most likely is an economic collapse. And in fact, as I was finishing this book up over Christmas, my latest one, which is a novel, I started to rush a little bit because I saw everything going down, and I thought, well, maybe I need to get this book out so at least some people read it before the economic collapse happens, because it seems that it's going to happen at some point. Now, I could be wrong. I live in two worlds. I live in a world of got to be ready for when the economic collapse happens, and the other world is maybe it isn't going to happen for a few years, so just keep things going and obviously live in the normal life, but being prepared to should it happen.
Now, can you provide us with 2 or 3 simple yet effective survival tips?
One thing I do here is this might sound a little bit corny, but I would say read Contact, because it's all in there in terms of survival tips. But what you really want to think about, without even getting into that, is you need some way of defending yourself, which comes down to some kind of firearms. You want to think about having a store of food, but you also want to think very carefully about your location, and resisting the urge to run for the hills or head for the hills when a disaster happens, because you may want to think about hunkering down in place, and that leads you onto another thought process of where you actually live and where would be a good place to hunker down. And that's not going all the way to the gold standard you see preppers talk about, which is having some retreat out in the mountains. And I know a lot of people can't do that, and I certainly don't live in that kind of situation. But you want to think about where you live and how you can make that place into a situation where you could at least hunker down there and survive, whilst the initial craziness of whatever kind of collapse situation happens hopefully washes over and past you.
Now, one of the tips you offered was firearms. That's kind of like a practical tip. You mentioned food supply. You want to store up on food. How much food should people get? I mean, how much? A month's worth? 6 months worth? What would you encourage?
I would encourage. I mean, a sort of a silly answer would be as much as possible. But I would encourage people to get a year's supply of food. If that's a mixture between what you can have in cans and what you can have in dehydrated food. And I realize that that's expensive and costs money, but it doesn't have to be that expensive. Even if you just get rice in bulk, rice, that kind of stuff, put it in the 5-gallon containers with the Mylar bags. Any prepping site will tell you how to do that, and then get some other stuff to supplement it. But I think that if a serious collapse happens, now there's 2 things here. And when I wrote my book Patriot Dawn, I wrote of a kind of a collapse overlain with a government tyranny and a regime that rises. You could get a collapse of the kind of the apocalypse type thing where everything suddenly goes away, or you could get a government tyranny situation. But really, you want to be able to survive through the initial, what you might call a die-off, as the situation goes through, and get yourself at least through that first year until you can get to some kind of sustainable situation where you can try and produce some kind of food. Hopefully you'll be able to survive through the initial die-off. And the reason for the firearms is to keep those people away who want your food, so they themselves can survive through that die-off period.
Now, we obviously have eFoods Direct here, which is they work with us. But you had mentioned rice. A lot of these foods, they take up space. Aside from rice, which is pretty, you could stack that up and it doesn't take up that much space. What type of other foods can people get?
Well, they can get the dehydrated food, which can be a little expensive, but that's a good convenient way of getting food. They can get canned food, but that's heavy, and a little bit perhaps expensive. I would go for a mix of putting some of your own stuff away in bulk, which is a little bit cheaper, as we mentioned, the rice, getting some dehydrated food, and without mentioning any brand names, but and also get a good sort of a pantry stock of canned food, spices, all the little extra additional items that you're going to need. And the other thing is if you live in the kind of environment where you can do this, obviously not in the inner city, but if you have some kind of acreage with a homeowners association that will allow you to do it, you can get chickens, you can maybe get a goat for milk, something like that. Start a little garden, just a vegetable garden. All these kind of things will supplement your food and allow you to have some fresh stuff and keep you going, a little bit longer.
And part of my naiveness, what is dehydrative food?
Sorry, did I say dehydrated?
Oh.
So you can get you get brands like Mountain House and Thrive, and you can get these anywhere. And it's just basically we add hot water, and the food will reconstitute. And so it's very convenient. All you've got to do is have the ability to. I've never tried it, but you can actually eat them with cold water. But I don't think that's going to work very well. But if you're desperate, you're desperate. But you've got to consider that. You may not have, for instance, bread, so you might want to think about a way to make bread. And if you think you can't do that, then you want to think about maybe you can get in the same people that sell the dehydrated food, you can get things like pilot crackers, and so you can get a bunch of those tubs of the pilot crackers, and think about what you're going to put on it. So maybe you can get some canned butter or some peanut butter, which lasts a long time, and just think about how you're going to survive without being able to go to the supermarket, and think how you're going to cook that food and heat that water. So you want to think about, maybe you've got a bit of propane, and how long is that propane going to last? So do you have a wood burning stove or a supply of wood? And it kind of snowballs into, this is the whole prep. I'm getting into the whole prepping thing here, but you've got to imagine yourself in a situation without utilities where you can actually think of alternatives for what you do now, and even that goes across to hygiene and taking a shower. So how are you going to do that? Well, obviously in the water supply, maybe on a wood burning stove you can heat some water, and then this is something actually I first did in Afghanistan, which is to use one of those solar showers. But when it's cold, you can actually fill one of those solar showers with hot water that you use on a wood burning stove, and then you can go wherever's private, hang up a bar in your bathroom.
Sure.
And you can actually take a shower and think about how you're going to work on your hygiene and the hygiene of your kids.
What are your thoughts on the fact that the federal government is cracking down on assault weapons, as are local governments? What's your take on that?
Okay, I think that sorry, my phone was going off there. I apologize. I think, again, they talk about assault weapons. These are not assault weapons; they're semi-automatic weapons. I think this is just part of the of the whole crackdown, which will probably, if it's allowed to continue, will result in eventual confiscation. I'm also deeply unhappy about it because I consider those things that they call assault weapons, your AR-15s, that kind of thing, as the premier thing that you want to have to use for self-defense. So, for instance, I have a couple of them, and you need to have the right gear. As you mentioned before, I'm a tactical instructor, and I write about this in my books, and I actually train people. And you need to have the right gear, the right number of magazines, which they call high-capacity magazines, but of course, it's just a normal 30-round magazine. And you need to have a number of 30-round magazines, an ammunition resupply. You need AR-15s or similar AK-style weapons. Of course, they're only semi-automatic weapons. They're not fully automatic military weapons. But these are the premier things that you want to have in order to actually defend your family and your, wherever it is you find yourself hunkering down in your house or your retreat or wherever it might be should a collapse happen.
But let me just play devil's advocate here. Many people are saying, oh, come on, you don't need to have a gun that shoots 100 bullets in 20 seconds. The Supreme Court has ruled, or one of the higher courts, that there can be reasonable restrictions on guns. There are just some certain things that are too powerful that the average guy on the street doesn't need. What do you say to that?
Well, I think it's ridiculous, and I think it's also disturbing. If we bring it back to the idea of a collapse, then clearly you need the ability to actually take down multiple assailants if you're in a collapse situation. If you're a family hunkered down in a farm building somewhere and you've got food, and some of these marauders, whoever it might be, find out that you have, then you need the ability to actually even the odds a little bit. And clearly you're not going to be able to fire 100 rounds off in 20 seconds, all the things they talk about. But it also seems to be meaningless as well, because the bad guys will always have the fully automatic weapons, the high-capacity magazines. So criminals will still be able to go and do what they do. All this is really harming is the innocent, law-abiding person. This is the person that I wrote my books for, the guy with the family who needs to protect them, whether that be from people before any kind of collapse or whether it's after collapse. Clearly, the focus of my books is for a post-collapse situation. And the other side of that is that if you're a crazy guy who wants to go shoot up a school, there's lots of effective weapons or ways you can do that without having an AR-15 with a 30-round magazine. I mean, these shotguns with pump-action shotgun, you can do a hell of a lot of damage with one of those. Dare I say it, you went into school with an axe, you could do a hell of a lot of damage. I mean, unfortunately, without anybody hearing the gunshots. So I just don't think it's a fair argument. And what really concerns me about the whole thing is that it's a specious argument about whether you have a 10-round magazine or a 30-round magazine, but you're just eating away at people's ability to actually defend themselves. Because who are these people to say that you won't need 30 rounds or change magazines to another one because you've got multiple attackers coming at you? Who's to say that 10 rounds is enough? And there's multiple things in the media right now. There was something recently about a woman who was home with her kids, and she had a small revolver, I think, with 5 rounds in it, and she hid in the attic while one guy broke into her house, and she shot him 5 times with this revolver when he finally found her and the kids in the attic, and he still managed to walk out of the house. So New York has just said that you can only have a 7-round capacity firearm. So are you saying that 7 rounds is enough? And what if it'd been 2 attackers? Clearly 5 rounds wasn't really enough. It persuaded the guy to walk out, but he wasn't dead. So I think it's a specious argument, and I think it damages, firstly, the ability of people and families to protect themselves in what part of what I'm talking about here is a collapse situation, a financial collapse when the electronic benefit checks don't work anymore and there's mobs rampaging in the streets. And it also ultimately infringes on the ability of the Second Amendment, the real reason of the Second Amendment, which is to ensure that the people can defend themselves against tyranny. Now, clearly the people don't have main battle tanks, drones, attack helicopters, but they should still have the ability to have, something that approaches a military weapon. Okay, my new book is Patriot Dawn, which is Patriot Dawn: The Resistance Rises, and this was my attempt to not only just write a good story, but to bring some of my tactical knowledge that I've written in the manuals into a novel, so that the characters in the book are doing this and are kind of facing a collapse situation. They're facing government tyranny. There's a resistance that forms. My main character is part of a resistance group that he kind of wasn't in before but gets dragged into, and then he trains up his guys and they conduct operations against the regime. And part of the reason of the book is to kind of go through and explain, without being boring, but interweave into the storyline some of the tactical themes that I go through in my manual. So I actually have people doing it, which I know for many people is a better way of learning and understanding. And partly also what I like to do with the book is to give people, people talk about fighting against tyranny. They talk about, my cold dead hands, but just to give people pause to think and just to give them an idea of what they might be facing should the situation ever come to pass. So I've got drones, I've got attack helicopters, I've got big bad regime forces coming after the resistance movement, and just to give an idea about how something like this may potentially go down. Not saying it is the way it will happen, but just to kind of give people pause for thought.
Okay. Well, Max, thank you so much. And people can go to maxvelocitytactical.com if they want to see the books or if they want to get some tactical training. Max, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. You're a great patriot.
Thank you very much.
Anybody that assaults our Second Amendment is bad news. It needs to be attacked politically. They want to disarm you. They want to take your claws away. They want to make you a slave. You need to take that real personal.
People who have credibility with young people should be on the television telling these youngsters that it's wrong to carry a gun.
Handguns do not enhance our safety.
And just really brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way.
We can't have a totally armed society.
I'm not a sixth grader. Senator, I've been on this committee for 20 years. I was a mayor for 9 years. I've seen the bullets that implode. This does not prohibit. You use the word prohibit. It exempts 2,271 weapons. Isn't that enough for the people in the United States?
Mr.
Do
Chairman,
they need a bazooka?
Senator Dianne Feinstein was the author of the assault weapons ban in 1994.
Professor Koppel, was the 1994 assault weapons ban a sensible and effective means of reducing gun violence?
Based on the Department of Justice study, the answer was no.
The assault weapons ban made sense.
Easy to shoot, big clips, 100+ bullets in each, large velocity guns, outright ban, picking up every one of them. Mr. and Mrs. America, turn them all in.
It was just too many guns.
We'll never get a handgun ban with the Second Amendment as stated.
I don't know. I don't know that we can't.
In the spirit of gun control, will you disarm your entire security team?
You will get right back to you.
You'll get back to me?
You know, we want everything on the table. This is a moment of opportunity. There's no question about it.
Making sure that we have a president, I cannot put my partisanship aside, a Democratic president, who will take that office and use it.
If there are any folks who are out there right now who are gun owners, and you've been hearing that somehow if somebody's taking away your guns, get the facts. We're not proposing a gun registration system. We're proposing background checks for criminals.
Your access to the right to bear arms is canceled because you're not part of the American family. You don't deserve that right. There is no right for you.
None of these rights are absolute. None of them.
No one will be able to be armed. We will take all weapons.
Congress has repeatedly outlawed gun registration because of the accurate recognition that in other countries and in the United States, in New York City, gun registration has been used as a tool for confiscation.
Well, that's why if we have universal background checks, that'll affect every single kind of weapon. The Brady campaign thinks that of all the things that have been suggested, that this may actually be the thing that goes the most.
It won't create any gun registry. That is already illegal.
You know, we're going to push as hard as we can and as far as...
So the assault weapons ban is just the beginning?
Absolutely.
And the one that I've been pushing, which is universal registration.
I mean, I'm against handguns.
That's why every time you see a bill to take weapons away from the American people defeated in Congress, 4 more are introduced immediately. It's a never-ending battle. That's why they lie about the statistics. The truth is, in a town where everybody owns a weapon and everybody knows it, there is almost no crime.
This bill that I authored grew out of a hearing we were having on violence on the border of Mexico.
When were you first told or became knowledgeable about U.S. officials allowing firearms to be sold to the drug cartels in Mexico?
Again, Mr. Chairman, I don't know. 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 That I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know whether or not. I just don't know. I don't know exactly how IRS has constructed it. I don't know when the subpoena was issued. Well, I don't know precisely. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the specific questions. I don't know what happened. Well, I don't know. 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 I don't know.
You get to find the truth. Don't ask me. I don't know.
Technically, I don't know. I don't know.
Lies, 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 lies.
You've heard it here. I'm on television, so everybody knows it. I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in people's lawful right to bear arms.
Is that guy serious?
I will not take your shotgun away. I will not take your rifle away. I won't take your handgun away.
Mr. and Mrs. America, turn them all in.
People that did that.